The market was loud and crowded as the day dragged toward evening. Dust floated through the air, sticking to boots, carts, and tired faces. People moved fast, arguing over prices, loading wagons, pulling animals by their ropes. No one stayed in one place for long. Everyone had somewhere else to be. Near the edge of the market, away from the noise, a woman stood alone. She was about 35, her face worn by long days. But she held herself straight. A thin cover hung over her shoulders, not enough to hide her shame or the cold. People passed her without slowing down. Some glanced at her, then looked away. Others acted like she wasn't there at all. No one asked her name. No one stopped. It was clear she had been left behind, and no one noticed her anymore. She had been standing there for hours, long enough that her legs shook even when she tried to stay steady. The man who claimed to own her paced nearby, stopping only to complain, his voice sharp with impatience. He paid little attention to her, tugging at her thin cover when it slipped, then turning away again. The wind pushed through the market, cold and dry, cutting into her skin. Her lips cracked and her feet ached, but she did not move. Each time someone passed, she felt their eyes slide over her. A few stared for a second, curious or bored, then walked on. Most chose not to see her at all. She kept her hands still, her head lifted just enough. Fear pressed deep inside her, but she refused to show it. The cold hurt, but the shame burned deeper, and she carried it in silence. Around her, the market went on as if nothing was wrong. Men argued loudly over prices, counting coins and shaking hands. Animals were pulled forward, checked and discussed with care. People laughed, joked, and shared news while standing only a few steps away from her. No one asked who she was. No one wanted to know where she came from or what had happened to her. Her owner grew annoyed, muttering that she was too old, but that no one wanted her, that she was a waste of time. His words carried no anger, only boredom. To him, she was just another thing that had failed to sell. In that place, goods mattered more than people, and no one seemed ashamed of it. Henry arrived without drawing attention. He stepped into the market like a man who had done this many times before and never stayed, longer than needed. He was middle-aged, broad in the shoulders, with a calm look that did not change easily. He came for simple things, tools, grain, maybe salt, and nothing more. People knew him as someone who kept to himself, a man who spoke little and left early. While others rushed from stall to stall, Henry walked slower. He watched the way people moved, how their voices rose and fell. He noticed the small shifts first, the way conversations lowered, the way eyes turned away too quickly. Something felt off, though he couldn't yet say why. Before he ever saw her, he sensed that the market was hiding something it didn't want to face. Then Henry saw her. She stood apart from the others, her back straight even though her body looked worn down. Her eyes were tired, not broken, the kind of tired that comes from holding yourself together for too long. When their paths almost crossed, she lowered her gaze, careful not to meet his eyes. He noticed her hands clenched tight near her sides, trying to keep what little warmth she had. No one stood close to her. The space around her was empty in a way that felt planned, not natural. Henry understood at once that she had been left there, not by accident, but because no one wanted the burden of noticing her. He didn't stare. He didn't speak. He simply stopped, and in that quiet pause, the truth of her situation said more than any words could. Henry turned to a vendor, stacking crates nearby, and asked a simple question in a low voice. The answer came quickly and carelessly. The woman had been brought in earlier, the man said. No one wanted her. Too old to sell, not worth the trouble. Her owner was just waiting to leave her behind. Henry listened without showing much on his face. He did not feel anger rise in his chest, only a heavy sense of duty. He had heard this kind of talk before, and it always left the same mark on him. Memories of his own losses stirred, things he rarely let himself think about. He stood still for a moment, letting the weight of the choice settle. When he moved again, it was without rush or show. He had already decided what needed to be done. The owner came back with a sharp look on his face, already annoyed. He spoke about her in a flat tone, like she was a broken tool that had taken up too much space. There was no care in his words, no pause. Henry did not argue or ask questions. He reached into his pocket and counted out the payment, placing the coins down one by one on a crate between them. He didn't try to lower the price. The owner took the money without hesitation, relief clear in his quick movements. Around them, the market did not stop. No one gathered. No one reacted. The trade ended as quietly as it began. There was no sense of winning in it, only the heavy feeling that something wrong had finally been brought to an end. Henry turned toward her once the coins were gone. His voice was low and steady, not rushed. "Can you walk?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. She swallowed, then answered softly that she could. He slipped his coat from his shoulders and held it out to her, giving her space to decide. She hesitated, her hands hovering in the air, unsure of what taking it might mean. The cold pushed her forward more than trust did, and she finally wrapped the coat around herself. Warmth settled over her skin, slow and real. Something in her chest eased just a little. She didn't thank him. The moment was too fragile for words. Henry led the horse out of the market at a slow, steady pace. She climbed onto the saddle carefully, her body stiff from standing so long. He walked beside her, keeping his steps even and quiet. Behind them, the noise of the market, shouts, laughter, the clatter of carts, faded into the distance. She glanced back once, half expecting someone to follow. But the streets were empty. No one called her name. No one made a move. Ahead, the road stretched out open and calm, the dust soft under the horse's hooves. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, she felt a small, cautious sense of safety. It was quiet, and it was hers. The cabin came into view after a short ride, small and plain on a gentle rise. Smoke drifted from the chimney, a quiet sign of warmth inside. The walls were worn, the roof patched in a few places, but everything looked clean and cared for. Henry led the horse to the side and stepped back, giving her space to move. She slid down from the saddle slowly, her feet touching the wooden boards of the porch. The door opened easily, and she hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. The room was simple. A small fire burned in the stove, a bucket of water sat nearby, and a few tins and tools were neatly arranged on the shelves. There was no lock on the door, no sign of danger. She moved carefully, taking it all in, measuring every detail with quiet attention. Henry set a simple meal on the table and stepped back, letting her move closer without a word. She ate slowly, aware of the quiet around her. There were no questions, no orders, just the steady warmth of the cabin and the fire. When the meal ended, he showed her the small bed in the corner, separate from where he would sit. A dim light stayed on, soft enough to keep the shadows from feeling threatening. Henry settled into his chair, watching the fire while she lay down. At first, her eyes stayed open, her body tense, listening to every creak of the floor. Slowly, the tension eased. She let herself sink into the mattress, breathing out the tight hold she had kept all day. For the first time in a long while, she slept fully, and Henry did not move until he was sure she had. The first light of morning slipped through the small window, painting the floor with soft, pale lines. She woke slowly, feeling the weight of fear lighter than before. Henry was already moving around the cabin, tending to tools and the fire without a word. The smell of a simple breakfast filled the air, bread and a tin of fruit. He placed a piece of bread near her and stepped back, giving her the choice to eat on her own. She hesitated, then took it, noticing how easy it felt to make her own decision. After finishing, she looked around for something to do and began helping quietly, stacking firewood and arranging tools, her hands moving with purpose. The morning felt different, steady and calm. She stepped outside, the cool air brushing her face, and looked over the open land, stretching in every direction. There were no fences, no walls, nothing to hold her back. Henry stood nearby, watching quietly, saying nothing, offering no instructions or promises. The future was unknown, and no words were needed to understand that. For the first time in a long while, fear did not push at her chest. She could move, choose, and breathe without worry. The quiet of the moment felt full, like a small kind of rescue, simple, steady, and enough to begin again.